All right, welcome back to the Skillist podcast. I'm Brad Salon from Roots School.
I am Matt Corradino from Caribbean Earth Skills. Woo woo.
One day I'll remember to wear a Roots shirt.
I keep wearing them every time. I'm repping hard, bro.
That's because you have one shirt that you wear.
What do you mean? I got like. Anybody watching closely realizes there's multiple shirts. This is the green with the St. Croix outline. Last time I had the orange with the arrowhead. Ugh.
Anyone who knows you know that you're prone to wearing the same clothes every day.
Only until...
It's not like I could talk, so
really
I wore this
sticky.
exact hoodie last time, so...
Once they're really... See? I'm doing better than you! My clothes way much
underwear.
less than yours. Yeah, it's true. Well, I don't need socks. Yeah. What are those? Underwear, I know what that is.
I have like a $300 investment in socks.
You have to have a $300 investment in socks when you live in the frozen freaking north. I've got 3 pairs of socks. I only wear them while weed whacking. That's it.
All right, so this week we are talking about the cross-section between survival and fitness.
Oh, boy. What do we call it?
Boy. Why it's hard to be fat and do survival skills.
I was thinking fit versus fat. What's your pleasure?
No, I mean it is an interesting topic in that, like, one of the things I love about survival skills is that you don't get to make up the rules. The landscape doesn't care about your feelings. Like, if you don't do what you need to do to build a shelter, you're going to be cold. If you don't do what you need to do to make a fire, you won't have one. And so it's a place where, like, we really, if you're going to practice these skills, there is, like, a real line in which you realize your fitness, whether it's, like, your body weight or, like, your muscle tone or your back health. Like, there's a lot of things that need to be managed in order to really be successful at these skills, and I just think it's worthy of conversation.
Definitely. And I would say that it's as far as like where the two meet, it's like badly under practiced or under recognized.
Right.
You know, there's a lot of people who there's people who are fat, there's people who are fit, there's people who are in the middle, when you start actually practicing these skills, you start to realize those places where there's like gaps in your understanding. Like, you know, you might work out every day, but what workout are you doing? And are you working the right muscle groups that are actually going to help you? You know, and then to me, the biggest, the thing that sticks out to me about this conversation is how television shows affect the conversation and affect the understanding. So when I was on Alone and looking at the comments that people make about how everybody does, because everybody's got a comment to make, even though they've never done it, they got a comment to make, and a consistent criticism. It was like, you didn't put on any weight. You know, you're too skinny, you're going to lose, right? And I understand that that's in the context of surviving the longest in that situation. But there's 2 huge parts of it that people don't recognize. One is that people put on a lot of weight, and I really did not watch the show. Maybe I've watched 5 episodes besides the episodes that I was, the season I was on. Maybe I watched 5 episodes. It was never like of interest to me. However, you will notice on that show and other shows like it where people put on weight, that in the early going, pretty much, I can't say every season, but every season that I've watched, there's an injury that you could conceivably say is because people put on weight instead of having their fitness. An ankle injury, a knee injury, a back injury within the first week. And it makes sense. You're sitting around just putting on fat and not working your body. And now you're putting yourself in a situation where you're working your body so hard. You're carrying some people will put on 40 pounds, 60 pounds even. Now you're carrying 60 pounds that you never practiced carrying that 60 pounds. You weren't walking around with a backpack on with 60 pounds in it and getting used to carrying it. And here, these months you've been spending getting fat and getting out of shape, and now you're at like some of the worst shape you've been in your whole life, and now you have to carry that extra 60 pounds. And so I don't think people recognize how much of a drawback that is. And the other thing is that even, and this fits into the context of the TV show, like I'm sure people are, you might be thinking like, oh, well, it's just to win this contest. I would never do that as a survival practice, right? When you lose 30 pounds, 40 pounds, 50 pounds in a rapid situation, like rapidly lose that, it has serious health consequences. You
Right.
can't just be fat and live off of your fat and expect to be okay, like as a get fit, right? You start to have
well, I
heart
mean, that's true
problems.
whether you start fit or not. I feel like that's one of the things about the shows that doesn't really get talked about is like the contestants are really playing with their health in a way that's kind of rugged.
It's scary.
That, like, yeah, a lot of people lose a lot of weight and like it takes them a long time to recover. I've heard about people from like certain shows losing hair or having their teeth get loose or like
all kinds of injuries, all kinds of
Yeah.
issues.
some pretty
well-
rugged malnutrition going on.
And that's where it gets. I mean, and I hate to use the word dangerous, but what other word is there? That's where it gets like dangerous as far as, you know, people look at that and they think, well, okay, if I want to survive the longest and it's hard to get calories, well, then I'm just going to pack my calories on my body and have that fat on my body, right? So first of all, how soon are you going to start, you know, having those heart problems? How soon are you going to start having those like physiological problems because you're rapidly losing weight, right? And so even in the context of the TV show, it might not necessarily work out for you because your fitness is lower. You're not, your body is like in a rougher situation. And like if it starts to affect you really soon, you're not going to necessarily win the show because you only made it to day 40 or 50 till you had those heart problems, till you had those, you know, like liver problems, whatever problems you start having. And there's the part about like, you know, when people win because they had that extra fat, or people think that, you know, okay, well, if I have a little bit of body fat, that's for the better for survival purposes. Like sitting around doing nothing and surviving off of your fat stores is a terrible strategy. It's a terrible strategy because you're not bringing calories in. Right? Yeah, you're spending what you have there, but let me tell you, you're going to spend those calories no matter what. And then you start to get, your fitness is down when you started, right? And you already, like, walking is harder, you know, getting up is harder, doing all those chores are harder because you haven't been practicing. And now you're not bringing the calories in to replace that. Your body is feeding off of itself. Like, it's just like, it can create a downward spiral. And you know, I think I've heard people saying that even outside of the context of the show. Like, oh, well, I would survive longer because wait, what am I slapping? Oh, that's muscle right there. But, you know, people slapping their belly and being like, oh, I got the extra calories and you don't got the extra calories. I'd survive longer. That's not the case. You're going to lose those calories whether you're eating or whether you're not eating because the calorie burn is insane in a survival situation. So you're going to burn that fat off. Better to be taking food in. It's definitely a common thing that I say to students when we do survival trips is you have to spend the calories to get the calories, right? You have to spend them to get them. If you're not spending them, it means you're not making the effort to get them, right? So you have to spend them to get them, and sitting back and I'm going to rely on my fat stores, it's not an effective strategy in any way because sitting back and relying on those fat stores, by the time you're like, all right, now I got to start hunting, where's your health at, right? What is your body, what can you now go up and hunt? Now can you, like, you know, trudge up that mountain? Now can you get in that water to land that fish? You know, it's like it's a slippery slope that you're creating.
That's one of the things that's been most frustrating to me being on survival trips is there comes a certain point where people just get a little tired from the malnutrition or like the lack of calories. and they just sit. And they're like, I've seen groups of people all just like sit around and talk about food for 2 days. And you're just like, what are you guys doing? Like, first of all, you're torturing yourself. Second of all, like, what are you doing here? If you like conscientiously put yourself into this experience to learn, like I get that you're tired. Now you're not learning
shit.
Right, but just like push through it. It's really funny. Like, I had this experience on one trip in a class that I was in, and it was like a huge trip. It was like 17 people or something silly like that. But that was like the number of people in the class. And the end of the year survival trip came around, and we all went out on this trip. And there was this very clear division between people who like pampered the shit out of their bodies, who were like, you know, would, you know, say like a yoga prayer on greeting you and like never mistreated themselves at all. And like 5 hours into being dehydrated, they were like crying and a total mess. And then I looked around at all the people who I'd like got drunk and hung over with, and like those people were all fine. They're all like, I know what it's like to wake up rugged and just go to work anyway. And not that like mistreating your body is the way to go, but that like there is
stress testing.
Right, there is a stress testing that's important, and there is like a pampering that like it's important to have walked both sides. Like you don't want it to be your lifestyle to always be stress testing. But at the same time, if you've never felt what it's like to go a day without water or to go a couple days without food, like, you know, I think those are important things, and you learn how to push through things. And I think that's one of the things that's kind of interesting to me about like the topic of fitness and survival in general is like, if you make working out a part of your daily routine, then every day you're learning how to force yourself to do hard things that you may not want to do, but you make yourself do them. And I feel like there's a big difference in the people that I work with who have that experience of pushing themselves through something hard versus people who like never do anything hard and now they want to take a survival class and now they're hitting a wall and they don't know how to push through it. You know, they're like, they're not used to that push.
You know, I have to say though that it, in my experience doing these trips with beginners, is there's kind of a, you know, there's like a line there. I guess what I'm saying is that a lot of times people that workout, that gym workout is a controlled environment, and right. So I've kind of seen both ways where it's like you do your workout, you're used to pushing your body through those hard things, but then like you're drinking your protein shakes and you're doing this progression and you're working these muscles these days and these muscles these days and these muscles these days, and survival trips just never like that. It's like, oh shit, well I gotta go and do this today because it has to happen. I gotta do this repeated workout for 3 days because I have to finish the shelter.
Right.
And so I guess what I'm saying is I've found both. It's like you wanna have fitness, you wanna have that like that mentality where like I can push through this hard thing, but you want it to be chaotic in some sense where you're not in control of every single factor, because you know that gets into like a mental trap too. Like, okay, I can push myself through this, but I need it to be like this, and I need to have these certain factors lined up. It's funny.
Yeah, I think the controlled environment though has its place. Like especially as I've gotten older, I've noticed the wear and tear that the skills will put on my body. Especially like a lot of the repeat use stuff, where you're like rasping for days on end or grinding a rock for days on end. Right, exactly. And so like I feel like for me to spend time in a controlled environment, like keeping my joints at a certain level, keeping my muscles at a certain level, makes it so that when I experience those heavy loads, I'm not like immediately redlining. Whereas like there's been times where when I was like doing tons of video production and I was doing tons of editing like an hour-long documentary that took a couple months to do, like going from sitting at my desk for 2 weeks to like trying to do work for the school when I wasn't in shape at all was way more rugged and like way more prone to back injury, way more prone to like just, you know, shoulders and elbows getting upset quicker. And that like, although cross training and making sure that like Like, I think to go with gym workouts is like, make sure you live an active lifestyle. Make sure you're like hiking over uneven terrain. Make sure you're carrying loads. Make sure you're like doing, I mean, you know, just doing the skills often leads you to like putting your body in weird positions and experiencing load from different angles, or even just like honestly sitting on the ground, you know, like being comfortable sitting on the ground. If you never sit on the ground, and you have no hip flexibility and you go to like do a survival trip, you're going to be like trying to build a chair when you should be hunting.
Yeah, totally.
You know, like,
I built some pretty good chairs though, I have to say.
yeah, totally.
You know, so I'm trying to remember how many years it was into this. Anyway, I lived in a primitive shelter for 7 years altogether. And this would have been after at least 3 continuous years living in a primitive shelter and teaching at a tracker class in California. Our friend Cliff, who lives in Santa Cruz, he has at least had at that time had a CrossFit gym, and you know I was there in Santa Cruz, and he was like, "Hey, let's go do a workout," and I went with him to do this workout, and you know, it's pretty rugged. But I was okay, you know, like it hurt, but I wasn't like coughing, I wasn't wheezing, I wasn't like, you know, because I know some people can go to like, part of it is to go till failure, and I wasn't completely done. I was definitely worked, and I was definitely hurting, but I wasn't like dying. Anyway, after that, that same day I was talking with another friend of ours, McElroy, and he was like, well, what did he have you do? And I explained the workout, and he was like, holy shit, he had you do that? He was like, well, were you dying? Were you like coughing and wheezing? And I was like, no. And he was like, you weren't coughing. And I was like, no, I was definitely like breathing hard, but I was never coughing. And he was like, and you know, asked me a few other questions like, oh, you didn't feel nauseous and nothing? I was like, no. But I was hurt, like I was tired. I felt it. But he was like, bullshit. And then he talked to Cliff later, and Cliff was like, no, you did all right. And then I was like, Cliff, what the hell? Like, why did you do that to me? and he was like,
oh, I didn't test your way.
Yeah, exactly. That's exactly what it was. He's like, well, I know you've been living in the Pine Barrens, and I just wanted to see how your body would do, like, you know, living so primitively, like where was your fitness level? And he was like, that was pretty impressive. Like, for somebody who doesn't do a CrossFit workout, he's like, that was definitely... It's like you passed a test kind of thing. And so, yes, there's nothing that gets you in better shape for survival than doing survival. Right. I just happened to be lucky enough to be in a situation where I could simulate that on a regular basis. It's just not possible for a lot of people.
I was going to say, most people can't. And so if all you can get is like, you know, that hour in the morning before the kids are up where you own your own time and you can like go down to the basement and, you know, pay your tolls, then like that's definitely better than not. And like I've seen people, especially like some folks I know in the production world who are like full-time editors, and they're like wearing braces on their wrists and their backs are destroyed, and they're like only in their mid-40s. And like that lifestyle of just being glued to a chair all the time is brutalizing.
It's pretty rough.
Yeah.
Which is crazy to think, because there's so many people who are glued to a chair, like stuck on the screen as their job in this country. Right. And then, you know, you often get a lot of those people taking survival classes because they can afford it and they're interested in it. And it's definitely like pretty brutalizing for people.
Yeah.
So, you know, along those lines, talking about that workout, what would you say are the workouts that you would do for that's the most directly survival like application?
Well, I think what I've learned is that what you already said is the truest, and that like sport specific training is the best. So like doing survival skills, it's hard to beat that. I think on top of that, or like in addition to that, or in order to maintain that like a good mix of cardiovascular health and resistance training is key. And I don't think it matters very much like whether you're into kettlebells or you use machines, or whether you use like compound lifts with dumbbells and barbells. Like I think that if you follow the tenets of like progressive overload and good form, and you warm yourself up and like you approach it intelligently, following the like thousands of years of sports science that have accumulated into a pretty basic understanding of how to keep the human body somewhat fit, that like what matters more than any of that is like consistency and not being dumb. Like you don't want to injure yourself while you're trying to keep yourself from being injured. But like a lot of us have ego problems, or have like the 26-year-old mindset of like, well, I'll just do it all right now, you know, and like you losing sight of like the importance of form, or the importance of like slow concentrics or eccentrics rather, like bringing the weight down slowly. So like I've found a lot of personal like success with just basic, you know, deadlift, squat, bench press, you know, rows, like the most basic lifting, just done really carefully with a bunch of like ancillary stuff to address other muscle groups or smaller muscle groups. But like in general, I found that being too dogmatic about anybody's like concepts of how to lift or like what to do isn't really valuable, and that you need to really listen to your body and try different rep ranges and different weights and figure out like which exercises give you the best payoff for the least amount of strain to your joints, and like work from there and make sure that like you're making a good trade. Like just because somebody says you should be overhead pressing, like if it hurts your shoulders, find a different way of activating those muscles that doesn't hurt your shoulders. So aside from that, I would say like if I only rasped at the bow class, then like when I went to like run a rasp for 3 days straight, it would be a problem, you know, like keeping everything attuned to like the work I want to do, or like shooting a bow. I don't know, it's interesting. Like one of the things I wanted to talk to you about this is like, which skill sets are the most demanding physically, but then which ones do you feel like take the biggest toll? You know, like flint knapping isn't like cardiovascularly challenging, but it can destroy your back and your fucking joints and your hands and your arms. Like so
quickly. Well, I did want to say, so if I could only do one thing as far as like what am I going to work on, or like, you know, like, yeah, what can I do every day? I say cardio would have to be the top thing, because we are cardio animals. Like we are endurance animals. That's our advantage. You know, like you can run down a horse because you can run for longer, right? You just got to keep going. And so working on that cardio like compounds what is already our like physiological, you know, we don't have sharp claws. We don't have, you know, like we can't run super fast. We don't have those, you know, super sharp teeth, but we can keep going. So like compounding that would probably be the biggest. And then I would say that I probably find myself doing squats and clean and jerk type motions more than other things. So I would make that like a pretty regular part of my workout. But I definitely agree with you that you would not benefit yourself by just doing those specific workouts. I mean, cardio, if you just did cardio and that's all you did, you would gain more, I think, than you would if you just did weight training and you just did resistance training. But you would want to mix it up because you're going to be lifting. You're definitely going to be lifting. And as far as the question of like what is the most taxing, honestly, I will say sitting for long periods of time. I mean, It sounds ridiculous, but like you're around the fire and you're cooking. You're not going to burn. You're not going to like. When I was saying earlier about all the people who sit at a desk, it's just like, oh, that's right. People have standing desks nowadays, but you're not going to stand around the fire every single night. You got to rest your body, so you're going to be sitting around the fire a whole lot. And for hunting, you're going to be sitting still. I mean, if I have as much food as I want to, then I don't have to still hunt, right? I can when I did the elk hunting with my friend Clay, we just went, you know, we were just going the whole time, and he was like, yeah, you know, if you wanted to, you could find one of these trails and just sit there every day, and eventually you'd probably have an elk walk by you. He's like, I just don't enjoy that as much, and that's great. It was fun, But we were eating. So survival wise, you're not going to do that. You might go for a while, but you're going to have to sit. So I think that's probably a number one thing, because it's so easy to get that poor form with that. Other than that, as far as skills that I work on, I think it'd be hard not to say that flint napping is the most toll on my body.
Right.
Yeah, I feel like with archery, if I'm using my back muscles more than my arm muscles, then it's spreading out the weight pretty evenly. And definitely with archery, I'm not of the mindset that you do 200 arrows a day. Like if my form is, if my accuracy is off, I'll go until I've tightened it up some, but I'm not just gonna shoot 300 times that day. Like if I'm shooting really well, I might shoot more, or maybe it's just one of those days and I don't feel like stopping and I shoot 1,000 arrows in a day. But I feel like you can keep up your shot without having to do that all the time. With flint napping, I feel like you kind of have to keep doing it.
Yeah.
And if you
flint
stop,
napping's weirdly perishable.
And if you stop for a while, you can get it back, but you have to you got to do it every day for 4, 5, 6 days before you kind of get back to that.
Yeah, you get your accuracy back, and you remember the micro rules that you've learned. Those little tiny details of exactly how to prep a platform, or exactly the feeling in your fingers when you hit.
That holding position, the slightest change in that holding position makes a huge difference. I mean, right. I guess, but honestly, the easiest answer is shelter building. But that's why shelters. That's why shelter's first, right? That's why it's first. It's not just because you need a shelter sooner than you need water and food, because that fluctuates. But it's also, especially if it's a true survival situation, is you know how much energy you have right away in the beginning. You don't know if you're going to have the energy in 2 weeks to finish that thing, but right in the beginning, you ate in the morning, or you ate whenever, but that's your only guaranteed amount of caloric intake is right in the beginning. And that's why you do it in the beginning. It's rugged work, and you have to do it right away, because you don't know what your calorie situation is going to be like a week down the road, a month down the road. So yeah, it's the easy answer is shelter building. But when you practice that, you usually don't keep building shelters every day or once a week. Personally, I'll build a shelter and then go back to it and touch it up. But maybe there's something to be said for once a month or once every other week building that shelter, because it's rugged on your body, and just finding those ways to move your body that aren't so hard on you. I wouldn't say fire making, because once you learn the form, it doesn't take you as long. And once you learn the form, it's pretty easy to figure out, okay, if I hold my body just like this, then I'm okay, and I can do this fire making.
I would say picking things up off the ground, or being if you were going to train one specific thing, like squats or lunges, where there's a weight or even something light off the ground, but do you have a position you're comfortable in to even harvesting dogbane recently? It was oh yeah, if I did this all day, my back would probably get fried. Because you're in there fighting, pulling the vines off, and you're at base level, ground level, because you want to cut it as low as you can. And it's a light material. It's not it's heavy, but it's just being as hunched over as you can be. Or leaf gathering for debris shelters. I've seen that frag people's backs.
Yeah, that can be a really rough
and rakes are great, and you can make them, but it's really to build a debris shelter. You're picking shit up off the ground all day.
Well, how much time do I really want to spend making that rake? Yeah, okay, to save my hands, sure, but to save my back, you're not lashing a handle to that thing that's going to work for the amount of debris you need to get. And, and that's a really good point. So now you get into awareness of your body movements. So maybe to add to that list of what you might do as your workout, stalking and movement through thicker brush. I feel it's tough there too, because you get into that rut of, if I'm hunting, I'm not going to be in the thickest brush because I have to be able to shoot. If I'm hunting with bow and arrow, right? I have to be able to utilize my weapon, so it doesn't, actively hunting, I'm not going to be in that thick brush, so maybe I don't need to practice stalking through the thickest brush. But then as far as like a practice is concerned, that's gonna give me the most payoff, stalking through thick brush, because I have to hold my body in all these weird positions. And generally, if you're practicing stalking, you're more aware of what your body is doing. It's more easy to have that awareness of what your body is doing, rather than if you're collecting dog bane, which is like a repetitive task that you're just kind of doing it and not thinking about, oh, how am I doing this dog bane collection? How am I bending over every time? Whereas if I'm stalking, I'm thinking about that the entire time. So like that's probably a pretty good practice because as a regular thing, because you're gaining that ability to move silently and fluidly through the woods, but you're also actively involved in paying attention to exactly what your body is doing, which has those other payoffs of being involved with it when you're doing those other tasks that you might not otherwise think of. Like
right.
I was, when you were talking about the dog bane, I was thinking about that first day when we do the survival classes here. Is like that shelter building is so much grass collecting, and it's just rugged. I mean, and like a deer jawbone with those teeth in there is like the A1 tool, right? People think of like using their knife, your dog in that knife. Like people think of like chopping it, even like with your modern tools, like this machete motion and holding the thing is like. When we cheat a little bit, we bring some modern tools just so that we can have more energy and time for other stuff, a little hacksaw. And we use a hacksaw to cut those grasses with. And usually people, oh, give me the machete. And then they do it for a little bit and are like, oh, no, give me the hacksaw. So you're using that hacksaw and you're cutting that grass and it's like a mindless activity. But you gotta like remembering like, oh, let me bend over like this. Let me squat like this. Let me use that saw exactly like that and not just haphazardly like how am I holding my arm and my elbow and my wrist and all that stuff? And it's just hard to remember that when you're doing that like mindless task. And that's why I think like a regular stalking practice would be a really good fitness aspect.
Yeah, totally. I mean, it's body control and it's like body-mind connection. And I think anything that you're working on where like if you're going to spend the time to do any sort of physical training, whether it's running or, lifting or whatever it is, like you should be really engaged with your form. And that like the shit you can get away with when you're 18 is not the shit you can get away with when you're 40. And you really want to work on like from an early age being conscientious of form. It's like one of those things, if I could go back and be like, hey, do these 10 things on that list, would be like, keep form in mind. Because, especially like I'll be doing work around the school and like firewood is a great example where it's just like, all right, I have to cut, buck, split, and stack, 4 or 5 cords of wood at least a year. Like if my only mindset is to get it done as fast as possible, like I'm going to feel that. I have to be like, all right, how many pieces is it reasonable to pick up at once? What's like the most physically efficient way for me to get all this wood up off the ground and into the shed? Like to be keeping those things in mind and not just speed is key no matter what you do. And so I feel like if you're doing anything to benefit your fitness, form should be, kind of primary importance or like top 5 most important things to be considering, especially for longevity.
I think that there was 2 things that you hit on there that are really key. That when you're talking about if I could go back when I was 18 and like teach myself that, well, obviously the form, but then like what is efficiency? Because as a young person, when you're into these skills young and you're like so excited to do them and you're just gonna do them, like I found myself getting into that mindset of like, if I carry 10 logs and I do 1 trip, that's more efficient than carrying 3 logs and doing 3.5 or 3 or 4 trips. And like, what is the most efficient way to do something? It's like, it's something that I would have paid more attention to, like, and
false economy.
And I think that's a really hard thing to gauge, like what is the most efficient, because how many days are you talking about being out in the bush or straining yourself in that way. And I think that's why it's like there's no better practice than to be doing the thing that you're going to do, right? As opposed to cross training, which has its benefits, but like finding out that efficiency, you're only doing that by long experience, right? Like you need a month so that you can really tell, like, oh, okay, like I really have to watch how I sit, or like, okay, more trips is better for me, or less trips is better for me. That's all partly greatly affected by your body, how your body works, like where your strengths and where your weaknesses are. And you can't really replicate that other than by replicating it directly. But I do think that if you had a really well-rounded workout routine, you could start to learn some of those things, right? Like, oh, I really feel it when I go for my, like, you know, max out on weight day, or like, oh man, I so feel it when I do 100 reps, right? And then it comes back to your form, right? That's why that other part is so key there. Like, if I do this with the perfect form, then which is more efficient? More trips or less trips with perfect, you know, like both having good form, you know, like you need to, those are probably the two most important considerations, I think, is like, how can I be most efficient in moving this load or doing this stress, you know, on my body, or like, what is the perfect form for this lift, for this movement right here. And nothing beats experience. Right. That's why I'm glad that it's tough when you go out in the bush with beginners, but I'm glad that I do it, not just for my own sake, where I'm like, all right, I've done it so many times. I spent so many nights in this particular spot in the bush that I know just what to do. But also when you do these things with beginners repeatedly, you see their mistakes. Like, you know, you're learning from somebody else's mistakes when you're doing that, right? Other people are going to make different mistakes than you might make. And so you have that opportunity to learn from them. What in the world are you doing? You're getting me all distracted, standing up and moving around, chopping wood over there, trying to be all efficient with your lumber bucking over there.
Nope, same thing as last time. This, for whatever reason, it burns my phone battery. Immediately.
Working with the modern technology. Oh, it's rough, isn't it? Dang, I had something in my mind that I wanted to express, but now I'm all discombobulated. You said something about, like, you know, spending the time making the chair versus
versus hunting.
Versus hunting, but you know, that chair is pretty crucial. Started to realize how much that's like
shelter, water, fire, food, comfort.
Well, what I was going to say is I started to realize, like, that's part of your shelter, right? Having a good camp set up where I can recover, right? And I think that's like an important part of this too, learning how you best recover. When I was one of the biggest concerns for me when I went on the show was how was my back going to handle it? Because, you know, I have an issue with a disc, and if I maintain it, it's not a problem. But it's usually at home, it's like rolling on a ball, or, you know, rolling on some kind of roller, doing my stretch routine. And so I did my stretch routine, but I didn't do it all that much. But I was like very conscious of how I was sitting. I was very conscious of, like, you know, like having my back support be in the right place. I was very conscious of how I was moving my body because I didn't want that to be the reason why. And I surprisingly found that it was not a problem whatsoever the whole time. Although looking back on it though, there was a scene, they didn't show it, but I had cut myself, and for 3 to 4 days I could not bend my leg. I was like limping with that leg almost completely straight, and then about 4 days it started to get better, and by like 5 or 6 days afterwards I was totally fine. This was like in the pretty early going, right? So for like 2 weeks after I cut myself, somewhere in the 10 days, 2 weeks, I was totally fine. That whole 2 weeks, 10 days, I got once I was in the aftercare portion, I was laying in the bed and my knee just started to hurt so bad. And I had actually like nicked the tendon, but my body just wasn't letting me feel the pain, is how I view that. Like, I wasn't doing something when it started to hurt. I was literally just laying in bed like, oh damn, my knee hurts. And it was a couple months of recovery from that. I had to really watch it. So you can learn from experience, but your body is, your nervous system is adjusting to that extremity and masking things sometimes so that you can take care of what you need to take care of.
Right.
And that was the other thing I was thinking of, is that when you do this with beginners, one thing that you figure out really quickly when you've done this enough, and that people don't realize in that first bit, is that you have more in the tank. You're talking about people like sitting around and you're like, okay, time to get up and go hunting. I had a group where they kept talking about Golden Corral and the cheese fondue fountain. And I was like, if I'm going to fantasize about food, that's the most disgusting thing I could possibly fantasize about. Anyway, yeah, so when you see people like just kind of wasting time, like using rest as a survival strategy, right? It's like you have more in the tank. You have more in the tank, no matter what your fitness level is, no matter what it is, until you're dead, there's more your body naturally holds in reserve. I had a group where the one guy was like barely, oh, I'm so tired, I can't do this. And this is kind of to remind them, like, you'll be all right, like you have more in there. And then the last day we were leaving, and he was like running up the hill. Because he was like, oh, I actually feel better. I can't believe I feel so good. This is great. And all it was like it was over, so he was letting his mind relax, and it was like his body was like, yeah, you could do this. So
yeah, I saw a great quote the other day that was like, all failures other than death are mental.
Oh, totally.
Or just like nothing but mental setbacks. And yeah,
totally.
Definitely resonated. I mean, I think that's like one of the things, what we were talking about with injury, that's really important since we're on the topic of fitness and our younger, dumber selves, is like, I've watched injuries in survival situations or like trips. I've never been in a real survival situation because I'm not dumb.
Or you're not
or
that
I've had good
dumb.
luck.
There we go.
Yeah. I've had good luck. But either way, like, I've been on survival trips where, I was handling like wet rawhide and I had a nick on my thumb and woke up the next day to like a swollen thumb with like lines going up my wrist. And you're like, oh shit, like if I didn't have any recourse to this, I could be dead in a couple days, and that like, or like a back injury or a knee injury or an eye injury that like were really pretty fragile in a lot of ways, especially if you're doing things you're not used to doing with your body. And that like approaching things, you have to work hard and you have to get the work done. But you also need to kind of approach things the way like a bobcat does, where they're like, I'm not going to risk injury until I have no choice, because I know that my body's ability to do the thing is paramount to my survival. So, that's something that like I definitely have had to learn and try and reinforce with students, is you want to have like a strong injury prevention mindset. Like first aid kits are great, but you'd rather just not cut yourself. And like I have scars all over both hands of like moments where I've had to relearn the knife safety rules, or that like there's no handle on a falling rock, like trying to catch something I'm flint napping and gore myself. But like, yeah, I think injury prevention is key. Like cutting your hand or your foot is so brutal.
What's funny about that?
Being able to do the thing.
That story where I was saying where I cut myself. When I cut myself, I was like, obviously like, damn, I cut myself. That sucks. But I was actually like, oh man, my pants. Like, I'm going to heal, right? I'm going to heal. These pants aren't going to heal themselves.
Yeah.
The pants are okay, by the way. They're
right.
Still okay. It still hasn't torn there, so I chose the right pants. But that was my thought at the time, was like, well, I'm going to heal. But the pants aren't going to heal. But
right.
Again, my body was just masking. There was more injury there than I realized.
One thing I wanted to ask you about, and this is a little off topic of like straight up survival, although it clearly has its uses, especially where you live, but like tree climbing is something that you've spent a ton of time in. And when you were telling that story about doing the CrossFit workout, it's something that came through my mind was like, well, as far as pulling workouts, you have a ton of experience and like training pulling yourself into and up trees and learning like how to use your structure, and your ligaments are all very strong from, your many year love affair with climbing trees. And I was wondering if you had any recommendations for folks just as far as like maintaining fitness of your shoulders and your upper body for the specific purposes of climbing trees, or like things you found that were useful or valuable.
Just simple shoulder stretches. Like, my arm out straight to the side, gripping something and pulling, and then varying that angle while I'm pulling until I'm fully extended out here and pulling straight back and then back up. And then the stretch because in the traps and in the neck is where I found like some of the most strain, and just looking down and reaching straight down. But that's the only thing that I've really found that's helped a lot is that, pulling. I can't really do it without having a bar, but pulling my arm.
Right. I'm
pulling my body this way and stretching like that, and then working it until I'm forward right here, and I'm pulling my this arm forward. And when you mentioned that thing about injury prevention, actually is what I thought of was like the tree climbing. And I've definitely climbed trees plenty of times in survival trips, to collect fruit so you don't smash it, to gather Bodro material in really, really wet climates has made a huge difference. Like I've had where I couldn't get the fire as quickly as I wanted to, and so I just climbed the tree and got from the tallest branches up in the top of the tree, and it worked just fine the first time, as opposed to like drying it out by spinning it. So anyway, I think it's obviously smarter to not climb a tree if you're in a survival situation or you're like putting yourself out there. However, if I'm doing that all the time, I have a better connection with what is too far. So one of the things that I did during my love affair with climbing, one of the things that I would regularly practice was there was a mulberry tree in this field that was down the street from my house. I would climb, I would do a lot of tree-to-tree practice, but one of the things that I would do is I would stand on the ground and jump and grab onto that branch, and then back up a step and jump and grab onto that branch until I knew exactly how far away I could be and make that jump, right? And it sounds kind of like silly, but you never know the kind of situation that you might be in where you need to just clear a gap. Not even like up in a tree, right? But just clearing a gap, or, like grabbing something, especially for hunting. We did a goat hunt here with my friend and his son, and I shot this goat. I shouldn't have shot at it, but I did, and I hit it, but it was a little bit, he was quartering towards me, and so it was a little forward, and it kind of caught too much shoulder blade and stopped the arrow. But the way he was going, I figured I could catch him, and I just went up went up the hill, grabbing, and it's not a cliff, but it's pretty damn close to it. You've seen that areas down where we do the survival, which is very, very steep. And I was just going, right? Not even thinking, just going. And it was getting closer and closer and closer, and then it got a little bit more open and a little flatter, and he was able to get distance from me. And I was just like, oh, damn, didn't get him. I'm up there, and I'm like, oh, well, shit, now I'm up here, and I'm being all careful, climbing down all slow, whereas I went right up, and my friend's son was like, how did you do that? I was like, what? Like, shoot the deer? And he's like, no, or the goat? And he was like, no, chasing it. Like, how did you get up there? And I was like, I don't know. And I only don't know because all that climbing experience, right? Like, my body just knew what to do. So even though you want to avoid those types of situations where you are endangering yourself, the more you do it in your controlled environment, the more you can just do it without thinking about it because you might have to do it.
Right.
So yeah, that's part of injury prevention is a little bit of self-endangerment right in there. And I found tree climbing to be very applicable. You know, it's definitely something you're not going to do all the time, survival situation, but it's been applicable. Situations
Well, it's
just
another
like
reason
that.
to keep your frame light too.
Oh man.
Like, you can be super strong, but if your strength to weight ratio is, non-existent, then.
Well, that was part of my strategy, again, going on the show. And I, like, just for the haters out there, I recognize that I didn't win, right? But I do not believe it was because of my physical preparation at all. I spent, so there was like what was that? It was like maybe 3 or 4 months from the time where it was a possibility to the time I was on the show. And the first 2.5 months, I was doing a physical workout and eating a ton of food, and I put 3 to 5 pounds of muscle on purposely. And then in the last month, I was able to put on 10 pounds of fat, like in that last, couple weeks before leaving, and then it was 3 weeks in the bush before actually heading out into the woods. And that's when I put on a little bit of fat. And as far as how my body reacted, I think it was just right for me, right? I did not want to have poor fitness. And yeah, it wasn't the physical part, right? It was the mental and emotional part that made it hard for me. And there was a lot of reasons why, I can look at my video I did if you care to hear the reasons why. Anyway, my physical preparation for me was pretty much perfect, right? I had just enough, a little bit of fat on there to help me go a little bit longer, but I was physically prepared for everything that was happening. I didn't want to be winded, like going up a short hill when I knew I was in a mountainous area, and that really worked for me. That was just how I needed to prepare for that. I was looking at it as like, I want to do this as though it were real. I didn't care about like being really fat and sitting around. Because I didn't have any interest in. I'm not saying I didn't have any interest in winning, but like I didn't care so much about winning that I wanted to do something that seemed dumb to me, right? And just being fat on purpose and just losing weight, sitting out in the woods, complaining by myself didn't seem to be of much interest.
Right. Well, it's interesting too. Like fitness isn't just about like your muscles and your fat. Like one thing I've seen really destroy people who are both had a lot of muscle and were not fat at all is like caffeine dependency. I've seen people just go the fuck down, like blinding headache for 3 days, like dependency to any sort of substance like tobacco or like honestly caffeine other than like opiates is pretty fucked up in terms of like
brutal reaction to that.
Yeah. And so I think that's another thing to consider. Even like food wise, I try and tell students like when we do our end of the year survival trip with our long-term program and they know, months in advance they're going into it. I'm like, if you can veer your diet towards heavier protein, heavier plant intake, less like super dense carb intake, that's going to more realistically match what you're going to be getting in the bush and like more bitter foods, like upgrade your palate for bitters and like, try and think about like what are you going to be challenging yourself with in terms of your input, like more fibrous starches. How do you do with inulin? Like some people eat J-chokes and they're fucking destroyed. They're just like
that's
stomach cramps
artichokes.
And farting. Yeah. The sunchokes or the Jerusalem artichokes, like those can destroy some people. So like having your digestive system be like ready for the experience, and also like that no caffeine dependency thing is just huge.
Yeah, it's definitely something that I remind people of before we go out on those trips during the preparation phase. Like, hey, scale it back now so that you...
Right.
I've seen people be completely crippled because of that.
Yeah.
So, it's been a good discussion. We should wrap it up here, but with some you don't like that.
Hell yeah.
'Cause I'm going to show you some cool stuff, but I know that you don't like that. And I gotta say, after our first episode talking about steel versus stone, I went with some steel. I got this I got this hunting class coming up, and I knew that the students aren't going to necessarily be able to make a stone point, or we're going to work on stone points and bone points and all that. But it's like, might as well do some steel, and I was going to buy some trade points, and my buddy was like, I was just talking about it, oh, we're going to do trade points, and he's like, oh yeah, that's great, they're easy to make, and out of spoons, and blah, 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 and I was like, oh, duh, let's make them, not buy them. So I got my circular saw that's all spent, and out of the corner here, you can see I cut this arrowhead piece right there, and it's like, I tell you what, the hardest part to grind down has been that carbide tooth right over here. I'm obviously not done with it. I'm going with a double bevel instead of a single bevel. But this is going to do two things for me, because one, it's going to allow the students to have a more effective hunting quiver, because they're not going to learn flint knapping that quick. They might make a nice bone point, but you got to work pretty hard at keeping that thing sharp. So it's helping them with that, and then, like, oh my gosh, for penetration, this thing is so skinny. Like,
Are you worried about a lack of weight at all?
A little bit. So I'll probably add, like some extra glue to the tip, or something for adding a little bit of weight. I haven't really thought about how we're going to add the weight. Maybe if you take a nail, especially for some of the materials we use for arrow shafts. Have that soft, pithy center. So just mashing a nail in there just for the weight difference. What
about like a hardwood foreshaft?
Yeah, that's also what I thought, using some of the black palm for a foreshaft. I mean, then you have the other penetration issue, because when you shoot it, the transition from the foreshaft to the rest of the shaft, you got to make sure that it's not hitting the handle of the bow and hitting the arrow rest and throwing it off. And then having the foreshaft be long enough so that when it can penetrate far enough into the animal to get to the vitals, because when it gets to that transition to the rest of the shaft, it's not likely to penetrate unless you've really tore a hole in that animal. But even still, hard to penetrate past that. So that's my solution thus far, is my handy dandy piece of steel.
Nice.
So we'll see how that works out for the students.
Yeah. Last time I talked about my reflex deflex, and here it is.
Nice.
Yeah, this thing, like, you can see how small it is. It's 58 inches, which, if you do the math,
that thing is small.
My bow length should be 66. Which
is huge.
Right, that's a lot off. And then because a shorter stick is harder to bend than a longer stick, it's pretty thin. Like, it doesn't need a lot of wood. It's like 55 pounds. And it's so light, and that I think a big part of the accuracy gains I've experienced, aside from the smoother draw, is it has no hand shock. Like, compared to this bow at 68 inches, I had to remove like a shocking amount of wood to keep it the same weight after cutting 10 inches off of it. Like, I had to go after it with a rasp. I didn't expect really to have to take that much off. But this thing, So I feel like my next couple builds are going to be reflex deflexes that are just like ignorantly short.
Nice.
That, and like, I'm really digging the more thick brickish handles. Like, I used to really make my handles so that they were tapered here and here. And I'm really digging this like full square handle. I mean, the sides are crowned, like, it's comfortable, but at the same time. And then this is kind of interesting. From sitting on stand and having my arrow on the rest and having to like hang it up to, fiddle with my gloves or whatever, I'm always like worried about this arrow falling off. So I purposely did my lacing and left it long here so I can use this to tie a quick slip knot around the arrow and then hang it up, and I've got an arrow like ready to go
on the shelf. Awesome.
On the shelf. Yeah.
It's a great idea.
Those are some cool little
it's a great
changes.
idea, but I don't like that.
Yeah, you don't like that.
You don't like that. I mean, you like that, but you don't like that. What? Don't
No, dude,
tell
that
me.
point is cool. I'm pumped. I'm really bummed I'm not going to be down there for that class. I was excited to be there for that.
I know. Well,
Denge
what
with a
can you
1-year-old doesn't sound like fun though. So we'll be there in March,
Denge.
and the water should be clearer for stabbing fish in the face.
Oh, definitely.
Yeah. So. Yeah.
Well, I guess that about wraps it up for this conversation, I guess, right? I mean, we're
definitely
pretty much done here. So, yeah, I guess as far as like what's coming up, I got my hunting class, and then I guess a ceremony class coming up in January that I'm pretty psyched about. I know maybe you think that's a little namby-pamby, but but haters gonna hate.
I didn't say a word.
Yeah. You didn't need to say a word. I saw that look on your face. It was like
That's
a little
not how I
eyebrow
would put
twitch.
it,
A little eyebrow twitch.
We'll get there.
Yeah, okay. We'll get to that conversation.
But yeah, man, what we got going on, we're about to release a new class that's going to be like a series of make and takes that's all kind of based around like things you can use in your day-to-day life. So like a carved wooden bowl, a bound book, a couple different knife styles that we're going to make, like steel knives, yeah, all sorts of stuff, like your own tool roll, and just, yeah, it'll be a broad range of like make and takes. We'll do some bark or some pounded black ash baskets, and should be fun. We'll be getting it up here soon.
Nice. Sweet. Well, thanks for watching and listening, everybody. If you got some ideas of what you want to hear us banter on about, then throw it up there in your comments, and yeah, we'll keep it rolling.
Yeah, totally. We will be getting to those questions we saw about bows and arrows and about water purification. So keep an eye out.
All right, everybody.
All right, till next time.